Heading into this season, a majority of national media talking heads were talking about how Penn State was going to win the national title, how this was going to be the year that James Franklin won a crucial regular season game, and how this was the Nittany Lions' year. Drew Allar was going to have a breakout season, and Penn State featured on the cover of multiple preseason magazines. So much so, I was going to make a video talking about how Penn State had the pieces to win the title. But something felt off to me. I just couldn't push myself to make the video. Maybe it's because I just don't care for Penn State, or after meeting James Franklin in the past, just not caring for him, or maybe it's because I wasn't going to believe what I was saying in the video. As a result, the video was never made. As we enter week 7 of the season, the idea of Penn State being a national title contender is all but dead sitting on life support. While this video, like my UCLA video from last week, may end up aging like milk, I still want to talk about what went wrong for Penn State and how the warning signs for an upset were more visible than people would like to think. But before we get into this, if you enjoy college football content like this, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Also, let me know what you think Penn State's final record is at the end of the season in the comment section below. Now, Penn State fans, I don't think it's time to start sounding the alarm bells just yet. There are still opportunities for the Nittany Lions to turn things around come November with matchups against Ohio State and Indiana. If you beat Ohio State, everyone will forget about the disaster that was the UCLA game. There's a strong chance they could still make the college football playoffs. Just look at Notre Dame last year after they fell to NIU. Going into the 2025 season, there was a lot of excitement around Penn State football. They were coming off an 11-1 regular season, but lost in the Big Ten title game to Oregon. They finally made the college football playoffs, beating both SMU and Boise State to make it to the Final Four, where they lost a heartbreaker to Notre Dame. But all was not lost. Of the Final Four teams in the playoffs, they returned the most talent. Drew Allar would choose to return for his senior season, when some projected him to be a first-round NFL draft pick. With the way the draft went in 2025, hindsight being 2020, I don't think he would have been a first-round pick though. Back in August, Mel Kiper would say Allar would be a top 10 pick and could be one of the top 2 or 3 picks in this year's NFL draft. The hype was through the roof for Allar. At running back, they returned Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, while at wide receiver they brought in Trebor Penna from Syracuse and Kyron Hudson from USC. On defense, Penn State made headlines when they brought in Jim Knowles from Ohio State. Knowles actually called James Franklin about the DC opening rather than the other way around. Knowles was widely regarded as one of the top defensive coordinators in the country. His defense at Ohio State last year ranked number 1 in points allowed per game at 12.9, yards allowed per game with 255, yards allowed per play at 4.2, and red zone touchdown percentage at 42%. Awkwardness with Ryan Day and a contract extension not being offered before the national title game led to Knowles leaving for Penn State. Penn State gave Knowles a contract that pays him $3.1 million, which makes him the highest paid defensive coordinator in the nation. It was a move that sent shockwaves through college football just days after Ohio State won the national title. There were questions around the defensive line, but they did have Danny Dennis Sutton and Zariah Fisher. They were deep at safety and had outstanding cornerbacks. This team seemed primed to have an insane season. Heading into the season, Penn State entered as the number 2 team in the nation behind Texas, earning 23 first-place votes in the AP preseason poll. Texas, on the other hand, earned 25 first-place votes. In the coaches poll, they entered as a 3rd-ranked team in the nation, and Phil Steele projected them to win the Big Ten title, writing, "The last 2 national championship teams were veteran-laden Big Ten teams, and Penn State fits that mold this year." The Athletic and every writer for Sports Illustrated had Penn State going 11-1 this season, with many expecting their lone loss to come to Ohio State and Columbus. Penn State came out hot out of the gates, beating Nevada 46-11, behind Allar's 217 yards and touchdown, while Singleton rushed for 2 scores, and Allen finished with the score as well. In week 2 against FIU, Allen rushed for 144 yards and a score, while Singleton rushed for 76 yards and a score, while the Nittany Lions won 34-0. The offense continued to roll against Villanova, beating the Wildcats 52-6, or playing against number 6 Oregon. This was a game Penn State had to win as they hosted the Ducks for a whiteout. Franklin was only 2-20 against top 6 ranked teams heading into the game. The teams went into half tied 3-3, would eventually go into overtime as Oregon outlasted the Nittany Lions to win 30-24. While Allar led 2 scoring drives in the fourth quarter, his interception in overtime cost Penn State the game. Allar struggled throwing for 137 yards and 2 touchdowns to 1 interception, also rushing for 42 yards. Allen only rushed for 54 yards and a score, while Singleton was shut down. Following the Oregon game, AZ Sports wrote, heading into this weekend, Drew Allar found himself ranked 52nd among Power Conference quarterbacks in yards per play, 53rd in passer rating, and 62nd in QBR, just unimaginably awful for a quarterback getting first-round NFL draft hype. Allar was putting up those putrid efficiency numbers against the likes of Nevada, FIU, and Villanova. It's no wonder he laid an egg facing a much more competent Oregon team on Saturday. The Oregon game, though, was one of the games Penn State was possibly going to lose. They would get to rebound against the UCLA team that looked like they were not going to win a game this season, and had just fired their head coach recently. Penn State entered the game as 24.5-point favorites. This was one of those games you maybe watch the first quarter but then move on to another game. The halftime score was 27-7. The game seemed over, except for the fact that it was UCLA who was up 27-7. It was a situation where if you were tracking via an app, you would think the app was glitching. But then you check ESPN, Fox Sports, CBS Sports, and maybe even go to Google to confirm, no, Penn State is getting blown out right now. Penn State would fight back, eventually losing 42-37. UCLA shut down Penn State's running game, holding Allen and Singleton to a combined 89 rushing yards. Allar led the team in rushing with 78 yards, while also passing for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was a complete and utter shock of a game. So far this season, Allar has thrown for 963 yards, 8 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, while the offense averages 175.5 rushing yards per game. The offense is averaging 38.6 points per game, which is 20th in the nation, yet it's skewed by playing bad teams besides Oregon. I've watched or at least had an eye on every Penn State game this season, and while the box scores look pretty, I kept texting a few of my friends saying I was concerned around Penn State's defense. Early in the Nevada game, the Wolfpack were able to drive down the field a few times, or shooting themselves in the foot by turning the ball over. On their first drive, Nevada drove down the field 44 yards on 8 plays, down to Penn State's 31-yard line before fumbling the ball. A few drives later, they went 59 yards and kicked a field goal, getting down to Penn State's 11. This was only when Penn State was up 17-0. Nevada scores a touchdown on either of these drives, or doesn't throw an interception on their own 25 on the second drive of the game, then all of a sudden this game is completely different. Their defense did not feel dominant like you'd expect to see from a national title contending team against a dreadful Nevada team. Think about how Ohio State has played against some of the lesser competition they've played in recent years. They just dominate. This is a Nevada team that is a 1-4 team and averaging 15.4 points per game, which is 131st in the nation right now. It's the same Nevada team that has thrown 10 interceptions through 5 games and has fumbled 4 times this season, meaning they are averaging 2.8 turnovers per game. That number isn't skewed by the Penn State game, as they turned the ball over 3 times. The Wolfpack's other 3 losses are to Middle Tennessee, Western Kentucky, and Fresno State, with them barely surviving against Sacramento State 20-17. While Penn State won 46-11, there were still red flags around this game. I felt the same way against FIU, who was able to get 290 yards of total offense against Penn State, went into halftime only down 10-0. FIU got down to Penn State's 13-yard line but couldn't punch it in on their second drive, turning it over on downs. On their next drive, they got down to Penn State's 22 before throwing an interception. There's an argument that their defense is a bend and not break defense, but at the same time, these are much lesser opponents that shouldn't be sniffing these areas. They are bad teams that could not just take advantage of golden opportunities. While in both games, Penn State would pull away in the second half, it was when these 2 lesser schools had given up. If they score a touchdown on their sustained drives, the vibes may be completely different. The defense showed up against Villanova, only allowing the Wildcats to get into Penn State territory twice. This is what you expect to see against Nevada and FIU. But then came the Oregon game, at home after a bye week. This is a game they should have won. Oregon, like FIU and Nevada, had opportunities but turned it over on downs and missed a field goal in back-to-back drives. This supports the bend-don't-break argument for this defense, but unlike their 3 other opponents, Oregon didn't lay down in the second half and continued to fight. Oregon scored touchdowns on 4 of their final 6 drives, with one of those drives being the final drive of the game with time expiring on the clock. On 4 of Oregon's final 5 drives, including overtime, they scored a touchdown, and on 5 of their last 6 real drives, they scored points. Penn State's defense forced 2 punts all game long. Against UCLA, the defense got shredded, forcing only 2 punts, the second punt being the safety with 17 seconds left, and forced 1 turnover on downs when UCLA went for a kill shot and went for it on their own 32. You brought in and paid Jim Knowles the big bucks to make their defense championship contending defense. Instead, they're a defense that has regressed significantly going back to last year and only looks good because they played terrible opponents leading into the Oregon game. If this doesn't get fixed, I could see Ohio State, Indiana, and even Nebraska shredding this defense. The warning signs were there, but they only recently became fully exposed. I don't know if it's worse that there isn't an obvious answer of why the defense is struggling compared to there being something obvious. Franklin said in his press conference on Monday, "You look at us specifically on the defensive side of the ball, we didn't have a bunch of missed assignments in the game. We're not executing the scheme or the techniques and fundamentals at a high enough level. Whether that's defeating blocks, our eyes being appropriate, those things." On threes, Frank Carr wrote this week, Penn State's allowed 22 explosive runs of 10 plus yards, tied for 13th in the Big Ten. However, opponents have run the ball 187 times against the Nittany Lions, second most in the league. Offense coordinators are taking the bait and testing Penn State's interior. The result, 4.3 yards allowed per carry, nearly identical to the Big Ten median of 4.39. The real issue is the yards after contact. Penn State defenders are often in position, but they arrive a step late. That hesitation leads to poor tackling and extra yardage. The Nittany Lions are allowing 507 rushing yards after contact this year. Without an elite defensive line controlling the interior, those problems are magnified. Knowles' defense worked at Ohio State because he had elite athletic talent that I don't think Penn State has. The Oregon loss was Penn State's first loss to a team not named Michigan or Ohio State during the regular season since Michigan State in 2021, a season that saw them finish 7-6. Penn State has gone from preseason national title contender to people talking about firing James Franklin. Under Franklin, the Nittany Lions are now 2-21 against top 6 ranked teams during the regular season. Everyone is describing Franklin as being on the scorching hot seat. For the Win USA Today's Tyler Natuno believes Franklin's legacy coaching the Nittany Lions could be defined by the UCLA loss, which he predicts could be the beginning of the end for Penn State and its longtime head man. Natuno wrote, "Despite the frustrating losses, Franklin's value proposition has always been that he will keep the program in contention by beating the teams Penn State's more talented than. Now he's 3-2 with a roster that is loaded on paper. Despite hiring perhaps the most highly regarded defensive coordinator in the sport, Jim Knowles, this offseason, the Nittany Lions defense still gave up 42 points to one of the most morbid offenses in the country. Barring a turnaround, the likes of what we've never seen Franklin pull off before, this team isn't going to the playoffs. Assuming that's the case, this could be the game that kickstarted the permanent souring of Penn State's relationship with its longtime football coach. This was supposed to be the team that brought Penn State to the national title. While that still may be a possibility, it doesn't seem likely with games still on the road against Ohio State and at home against Indiana. Penn State is staring down an 8-4 season or worse. Do I see Penn State firing James Franklin following the season? While message boards and fans are calling for it, I don't see it happening as I don't think Penn State has the money to pay out a $50 million buyout. But maybe this strains the relationship enough that Franklin says screw it and walks away for a few years like Josh Pate recently talked about on his show. What do you think? How does Penn State finish the season? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out one of my other videos YouTube thinks you will love right here. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, remember to embrace the grind.